Hello, good evening everyone, and welcome back to our third session of the In Out crowd. Even though we're staying in, we are still very much out. I am here, my name's Alex, I'm going to be your host for this evening with my little Hawaiian shirt looking like a bisexual Jimmy Buffett, so I hope you enjoy that. Finally, we've reached episode 3 and I'm really happy about that because 3 is of course a magic number. All the best things comes in 3s. We have Neapolitan ice cream and the Powerpuff Girls and, you know, 3 of Madonna's only successful albums. Just kidding, Tommy. And any other Madonna fans out there, I am very much a fan. Whilst I love a good chat, and you normally couldn't shut me up for the world, for this week's rest of the introduction, I'm going to have a wee chat with some of my fellow studio audience members for our very first LGBTQ and A. So for the LGBTQ and A, I'm just going to come to each of my fabulous studio audience members for a couple of different questions. You can say as much or as little about the question as you like, but it's really just here to spark some discussion and see whatever comes out. So the first question, I'm going to ask, what does the word equality mean to you? And to throw you into the deep end, Claire and Leslie are 2 fabulous body members. I'm going to ask you to start. What does equality mean to you?
So for us, we describe equality as if you have a level playing field, to make it equal, sometimes you have to take them past the level playing field so that they have the same opportunities to be equal. If that makes sense. That's like our analogy that we use in our life. Yeah. Definitely.
I think that's great. I think that's a really great way of describing that as well. There was this meme that's been kind of circulating, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like an apple tree, and people like the different ways to reach an apple tree. Have you seen that? Yeah. What do you think about that illustration?
Yeah, I think I shared it online. So that's like
I think true. It's something that like you can look at and it really does make sense, and that is the way that the relationship is. Sorry.
Yeah. Like sometimes when you take someone you treat people equally, that they're still at a disadvantage, so you need to treat them a little bit more equally. That's not English, but there we go. I'm not an English dance parent. I don't know.
Yes, we study dance. We move our words, darling.
Yes.
Anyone who's watching who hasn't seen that meme, it's really interesting. So it's an illustration with this big bountiful apple tree, and there's 2 or 3 different people who all want an apple from the tree, and someone is tall enough to just reach up and take the apple, and on one side it's bending so the other person can't reach up and grab the apple. So it's showing different ways of getting the apple. You can give that other person a ladder, or you can help bend the tree the other way. It's really interesting. So I'd really encourage anyone who would like to see that illustration, we'll maybe get a wee link to it in Google Images and we can pop that up on our Facebook once we're finished. Eleanor Walker, our fabulous special correspondent, I'm going to come to you next. What does the word equality mean to yourself?
Oh, using my full name. I think for me, equality is, to be honest, very similar to what Claire and Leslie were saying. I think it's all about an equal playing field and letting hard work pay off, and being able to reach any opportunity that you'd like to, regardless of what background you're from, or we know the list: race, sexuality, disability, anything like that. It's creating an equal playing field.
Nice. We're getting a bit of consensus here. Thomas Small, our special guest and artistic director for this evening, have you got anything to add or to rock the boat with what equality means?
Hello. No, I actually, yeah, I know it feels like a bit of a cop-out, but actually that is so well described what Leslie and Claire just said that I don't think I can top it. I think that's exactly it.
How about how?
Sorry,
Well,
Sanjay, I normally harp on for hours, but no, that's it. I actually think that's a really beautiful summary.
yeah. Has anyone else in the studio audience got anything else to add to what equality might mean? Because I would like to offer, what about this is actually not part of the LGBT Q&A, but I just wanted to offer this as a bit of a provocation, big words here, onwards from that. People might describe tolerance as being part of equality, but do you think it is? I'll go to Claire and Leslie first. Do you think that tolerance is equality?
Yeah. What do you describe as tolerance? That's my question.
So, for instance, tolerance would be, I don't agree with you, I don't see you, I don't get you, but you're here, so I need to put up with it and get on with it.
In the way you're describing it, that is not equality at all.
Yeah. I might be swaying you here, and I don't mean to sway you, but it's the old argument between tolerance and acceptance. Are they the same thing, or are they two different things, do you feel?
I think there's a difference, and then that goes with like the level of respect for people. Like there's people might have different political views, and you can like tolerate that and respect them, but when it comes to a person's identity or like personal, like not personal beliefs, but like actual like who they are, you can't really tolerate that. Like you either accept them or you don't. But as long as you respect them also and are willing to learn, it's like that blurred line. But it kind of goes hand in hand with, do you respect them to accept them rather than just be like,
Cool. Interesting. Eleanor, what about yourself? Do you feel like tolerance is part of equality or acceptance, or do you feel like they're different things?
They are different things, but I would argue that it's a stepping stone. It's a start. I think sometimes I know myself, I can be extremely eager to jump straight away to full acceptance and full celebration, but there's people out there who need that stepping stone of tolerance. So I think it's not something to necessarily be knocked. It's just, it should be tolerance with the aim to go on to acceptance.
Yeah, because I suppose if it's someone who's never came across someone of the LGBTQ plus community or any other community, might be quite difficult for them to just be exposed to a new personality, a new way of life, a new culture, and get it straight away. So yeah, you're right, tolerance might be a kind of on the way there, but maybe we want to go one step beyond rather than just stopping there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thomas Small, anything to add there?
Well, I think tolerance is, it's absolutely, in my opinion, absolutely not the same. It's interesting because Shaper Caper as a company, we actually had that as a value for a while. And then we challenged ourselves about it because we actually thought, because I think our aim for that word was about the thing about understanding where people are at and where they're coming from, and trying to find a way for everyone to feel listened to and to feel worthy and to feel validated. But I think we then realized actually the word tolerate, I think we had a feeling that there was a negative part of that word, which was about that was almost a reluctance to put up with you. I felt a bit like that, and whatever that equality might be, that we just felt that maybe tolerance was not the right positive kind of word that explained our intentions of what we were hoping for. So we ended up ditching that and we replaced it. But no, I think tolerance for me, there's a thing about I'm willing to tolerate Lady Gaga coming in on the pop chart and invading Madonna's space at the top of the charts. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we need to do way more than tolerate. I think tolerate is an absolute starting baseline, and actually it's more about people, you know, really working to kind of make sure everyone is included and respected.
And the work it out. As Brittany said, you better work. Beep. So moving on from that then, what would we like to see for the LGBTQ plus community in the next 50 to 100 years? So I'm imagining we've popped in a DeLorean and we went away, rocketed ahead into the future. Perhaps we're not around. I highly doubt that I'll be around in 150 years. But what would you like to see for the next handful of generations that we're not seeing just now?
Can
Claire
I jump
and
in?
Leslie.
Oh no.
Oh,
Okay.
oh no, Eleanor, off you go. If it's
Oh, I've proper just stepped on toes there. Sorry.
Go for it, I love it.
No, I just wanted to jump in on something that I'm learning myself, is that we need to know more about our history, and we need to know more within the community and without the community needs to know more about our history and how we've always been here, and just general knowledge, I think, is the main thing. And now I'll pass over.
Claire and Leslie, off you go.
So for me, like going off the history, like we've been learning so much with Shaper Caper at the moment about like the history and like Section 28's been mentioned and stuff. So like I didn't know what that was, and I've went away, and I think that's really important for people that aren't necessarily identifying as the community, like to understand this is really like horrible stuff that's happened, to allow, and just like for more generations younger, like it's just normal. Like I feel like I'm quite privileged that I grew up around a lot of LGBTQ plus people, and like that it's just been normal for me, and I think that's just what I'd quite like to see in the future, that it's not a big difference, like it's just cool sort of thing. Are you?
I think you're basically
Similar?
just taking the words out my mouth, like
Usual.
So in sync. Yeah, I think that would be really lovely, just that there's not this idea of having to come out or having to be explicit about who you are and almost have that as a disclaimer. It's just integrated into everyday life, and it's no longer a big deal. That would be, I can't really imagine that, but that would be really amazing if we could get there. And I'll come to you last, Tommy. What do you think? What would you like to see for another Tommy Small 100 years from now?
I would like to see, it's interesting because, you know, we say about it not being a big deal, but in a way, for me, actually, my gender and sexuality are a big deal for me. And I don't know if I want that to be different. You know, I've had lots of, you know, I grew up in the 80s, and I've had lots and lots of conversations about being identifying as a cis gay man, and I think, you know, I came out. I went through that whole kind of process of coming out. I speak to a lot of younger LGBTQ plus people nowadays who don't necessarily come out, and that was also true. I think some people think that that shows a big progression, but actually, I also know friends of my age who also didn't come out. That was just a, you know, very simple conversation. So I think what I'd like to see is that any stigma, prejudice, stigma or prejudices are parked. I think it's that bit I want parked. You know, my friends and I have often talked about whether or not there's a need for a community anymore. And I don't know, I feel like there is, because I'm thinking it comes from what Eleanor was saying, which is about history, about actually we cannot take for granted that our rights that we have right now in this particular moment in time in this country are always going to be here. You know, we had a few weeks ago, we had Remy and Kasia talking from Poland. We've also, as a company, done lots of research about laws around the world for LGBTQ plus people, and realizing that, you know, this is not what not everyone has this kind of luxury, almost, is what some people view as, of being able to have their human rights upheld. And you know, I'd like to think that actually that some countries shouldn't be thinking that it is a luxury. So that's what I'd like to see going forward, is that actually understanding that It's not a choice. It's not something suddenly you woke up one day and decided, oh, you know what, today I'm going to be gay, or today I'm going to be non-binary. It's not as simple as what people like to write about in press stories, or kind of when they're kind of social media warriors. It's not that, and you've actually entirely missed the point if that's what you think it is. So I think there's something about in education. I'm really proud to live in a country where we have, you know, a massive shift about to come in our education system about placing LGBT education for all young people in Scotland. So I think that's a truly progressive thing to do. And I'm really proud of Scotland, who historically have not always had the best record with LGBT rights, and, you know, only changed laws in the late 80s. So actually it's quite, you know, it's in my recent history that this is all changed. So I think, you know, so I know we're talking about 150 years, but actually within my lifetime, things have changed quite massively. And I'm sure there's people that are listening online who can identify that even kind of maybe further back. So I think what I would really like is for people for us to find this balance of, it does matter, but it also doesn't matter. So it does matter in that the history matters, and our human rights matter, but it doesn't matter in terms of people's bigoted opinions, and where they're not willing to look beyond their own worldview about and celebrate each other's difference.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much to everyone for your answers. I know I totally put you on the spot, but that's what I wanted to do. It's great to hear such amazing feedback and some differing opinions, but both ultimately going for the same thing, which is equality, and it is acceptance, and it is an understanding of where we came from, where we are, and where we're going. And it's great to hear that both LGBTQ+ people and our supportive allies, who are equally as important, are proud of who we are. And sometimes part of the community and being an ally, being any kind of different, feels like you get a lot of rain down on you. But as long as we continue to shine, that's what makes the rainbow come forward. And Kasia said something really brilliant from after the first In-Out Crowd session, and she'd said that it was a politician in Poland had said that when you marry the sky with the earth, that's what makes a rainbow. So it's those two opposing things coming in together. And I think with all that chat about rainbows, it's time for the weather, girl. It's raining men. Hallelujah, it's raining men. There we go, I've got my Channel 4 news happening here. Right, so in today's weather report, we have got the sun shining over Florida in the US, where Drew Adams, a trans man, has won the right against his school to use the appropriate bathroom for his gender. He has been fighting for this for over 3 years, and he has finally won the right to do so. He had also been quoted saying that he feels that this is not only a victory for himself, but for trans students across the world. And we couldn't be more pleased for him and for the other students at the school that this is a breakthrough for. Right. Next up, that one, we have a lovely rainbow as usual. This is to represent the rainbow over Birmingham currently, where there has been a new artistic rainbow crosswalk that has been painted based on the progress flag, which is added in the new chevrons to represent equality and inclusivity across race as well as sexuality and gender. The artwork was commissioned by the Birmingham City Council, and the artist James Cowper, also a drag artist called Gavina, which I just absolutely live and die for. It was commissioned earlier this year, but he said that the paint had sat in his dining room for months, and I think that's something that we can absolutely all identify with. And then finally, we've got some rain clouds. Heavy rain, lightning, thunder. The weather doesn't really know what it's doing just now over Dunfermline, where I am, as well as over Dundee, where most of you are, and wherever it is the Teleanor is residing in Germany just now. And I think that's because there is a little bit of confusion over a certain word that we are going to discuss after our weather report. And that takes us on to our deep dive political segment, Current Affairs, that we like to call Raisin Liaisons. So, for this week's Current Affairs / Raisin Liaisons, this is where we take a deep dive into a political issue or a social and cultural issue. The issue we're talking about today is the word queer. This has been a word that has been widely used, particularly in the last couple of years, in a really positive light to describe LGBTQ+ entertainers, artists, culture. It's being used as a reclamation and a describing word for who we are. But for many folks, particularly those pre-2000s, it can mean some very, very different things, particularly for those around before things like Section 28 were abolished. It can be quite a hurtful word to hear. And given that that's such a close frame in time for that word to have changed meaning or start to change meaning, we thought we would have a wee look at that. So I'm going to pass on to our special correspondent, Eleanor, who does have a short presentation about the word queer. Off you go, Eleanor.
Thank you very much, Alex. And yeah, my name is Eleanor, and I am here to discuss the word queer, as Alex said. It's been a point of discussion recently with a lot of people in the LGBTQ+ community reclaiming the word. You may ask why this is, and a lot of it lies in the history of how people have used it against the community. Before delving into the history, I do want to explain a little about what it means to reclaim a word. Marginalised communities or individuals have been and there still are subjected to terms meant to degrade. However, through a process called linguistic reclamation, these people can take back power over the words that were used to be oppressive. Common examples nowadays include slut, which is now used by feminists as an expression of sexual liberation, whilst geek and nerd are used with pride by people in particular areas of study, passion, or fandom. However, for some, the use of certain words are just too hurtful for people to reclaim, but more on this later. In its earliest uses, queer was used to describe someone or something as strange, peculiar, or eccentric in appearance or character. In the late 19th century, queer began to be used with the connotations of sexual deviance. And one of the first instances of it being published as a colloquialism to describe homosexual people was in a US government publication in 1922. For some time, particularly masculine gay men used the word queer to self-describe. However, around the time of the end of World War II, younger gay men started to reject the term and instead preferred gay. Between these times and up until around the late 1980s, queer was almost exclusively used as a horrible slur term, and it caused a lot of pain for gay people in those decades. The reclamation began slowly after the Stonewall riots and has been picking up a lot of speed in the last few years in particular. There are still people against the reclamation of the word queer, though, because they see it as offensive and self-deprecating, whilst other oppositionists see it as too slang or alternatively as jargon that is too academic. However, nowadays, many young people in the community use queer to identify, with a Q often now being included as part of the LGBTQ+ acronym. Queer can be seen as celebratory, as rebellious in nature. Loving one's own oddness can be a political statement within itself. Queer can also be used to defy the separationist feeling that some see within the LGBT community, and loving one's own oddness can be a political statement. It can allow individuals the freedom to explore in the grey area the word queer offers. It's also a gender neutral term, and it acknowledges those outside the LGBT acronym. I personally use the term queer to self-describe because I like that it's a way of saying I'm not straight in a lovely, succinct way. It's also very important that as a community we explore and research the history into the words we now like to use. And I'd invite everyone watching to have your own little research into the very interesting world of words. Thanks, Alex. I'll pass back across to you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. That was really informative. I almost wanted to give you a few round of applause, but then
I'm taking a bow over here. I know you can't see it, but I'm taking a bow.
You should. Until I realised that no one else is here, and that would be a little bit strange. So, well, you've already said there, Eleanor, that you do identify as queer. So I'm assuming from there, then you're someone who does reclaim that word and use it to feel pride in your identity.
Yeah, definitely. But I'll be completely upfront and honest. It wasn't until a couple months ago that I realised it was even a word that was being reclaimed. I never knew its negative history before I even started using it. So now I'm really happy that I have all this knowledge about it and are really eager to share it as well. And it's a nice extra layer that I feel like it's a powerful statement to say that I'm queer.
Absolutely. Well, with that, because we like to shake things up, I'm going to pass over to Tommy, who's another one of our special guests this evening, who has had a very different experience with the word queer. So Tommy, if you'd like to just share your own perceptions of the word queer and some of your experiences and how you view it.
Yeah, I think. Well, firstly, Eleanor, that presentation was brilliant. I thought it was so interesting to hear the kind of history of the word. And yeah, it's funny. So as I said earlier in the previous section, I grew up during the AIDS crisis. I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in Thatcher's Britain of, gay people, like gay men in particular. I'm talking about gay men feeling. We were the brunt of a whole, quite calculated dismantling of kind of human rights for a whole kind of section of a community. That is really painful to kind of like to look back at that and to think about that kind of history. And again within my lifetime. So I think the word queer was absolutely. I remember growing up as a young gay boy at that point, and absolutely knowing that I was attracted to other men, or guy boys. I was a child, and being attracted to kind of other boys, but and never ever thinking that was weird, never thinking that was strange, but always somehow weirdly knowing that it wasn't something I should talk about. And I grew up I'm from kind of proper working class background, grew up in a council estate that was pretty rough. And I think, there's absolutely no way I would have been able to come out as a young kind of, gay boy at that point. But I remember kind of hearing on my council estate the word queer being thrown around as a slur. And then I kind of didn't really think anything of it, but then I kind of started realizing that slur was being used about me as a boy on the working class, on the council estate, and thinking, oh, that's strange. And then I remember thinking, like, why they call me queer? That's weird. I'm not queer. And not understanding the word at all. And being, super young, and it was the 80s. So there was no internet, there was no computers to kind of check up on. I remember there used to be like lesbian and gay switchboard. And I remember calling that when I was really little or really young, like it's still at primary school, and phoning up and kind of asking about what certain words meant, because there was no other way really of finding that out. So I asked about queer and what that meant, and they kind of talked about it being like a slur. And a slur to describe gay people, I think is how they defined it. So it's always been a really ingrained word then that's meant it's a slur, and there's nothing positive about it. So it's been really interesting over the years as different kind of as words have changed and the meaning of words have changed in a positive way, and seeing the kind of LGBT community embracing the Q has been a really kind of like a bit of a difficult experience, I think, because I still, like, now when people say queer, I get a shiver. I go, because it feels like an attack, even when people are, you know, saying it in a nice kind of fun way, or if it's actually about someone being really positively describing who they are. For me, it's still just a hard word to hear. It's a really difficult word, but also kind of, you know, doing a bit of research as well and kind of finding out about the word. I thought it was really interesting that I read this little statement that I'm just going to kind of read out. It's on Wikipedia, so I did come up with it myself. But it's saying that basically, beginning in the late 1980s, the label queer began to be reclaimed as a positive identifier for LGBT people. One organisation called Queer Nation, which was formed in 1990, circulated an anonymous flyer at the New York Gay Pride Parade in June 1990, which said, "Queers, read this." And then it said this little chunk. Do we really have to use that word? It's trouble. Every gay person has his or her own take on it. His or her, it was the 90s, so people, you know, language hadn't changed by then. So now I'd like to think that would be more inclusive. But every gay person has his or her own take on it. For some, it means strange and eccentric and kind of mysterious. And for other, queer conjures up those awful memories of adolescent suffering. Well, yes, gay is great. It has its place. But when a lot of lesbians and gay men wake up in the morning, we feel angry and disgusted, not gay. So we've chosen to call ourselves queer. Using queer is a way of reminding us how we are perceived by the rest of the world. I thought that was really interesting because it was like so heavy that they're claiming the word, but actually they're claiming it as a way of remembering the kind of the damage that's been done, remembering the abuse that's been hurled at someone. And I just thought, that's really heavy. And again, it's very different from the modern kind of reclamation of that word. Yeah.
To pick up on that through my own research, another thing that I'd find was this further thing about queer being different, and there was actually or they named themselves the queer movement rather than the gay and lesbian movement, because a lot of the gay and lesbian movement around, say, the 90s, etc., was to get equal marriage, adoption rights, all very important things. But the queer movement was specifically trying not to assimilate, I think was the word that they used. So they were actually trying to celebrate their difference, which I love. Yeah.
Very interesting. Off you go, Tommy. I can see you having off you go.
No, go for it, Alex. I was actually going to ask you how you felt about the word.
Well, I think I've been listening to lots of different podcasts and blogs, and well, not listening to a blog, that would be quite interesting. Reading lots of different blogs about other words that have been reclaimed, and another one that a lot of female identifying folks have been reclaiming is the B word, which is bitch. So apologies if anyone is offended by that word, but what's interesting is the origins of the word bitch, of course, is, I think most people know that it comes from, a female dog was called a bitch. So if you call a person, a human, a bitch, then you're equating them to being a dog, which in ye old times, calling someone a dog was kind of, they were, lazy, they were dirty, they were, all of these other things that you just wouldn't want to be in the old Victorian times. But it was used specifically towards women and female identifying people as a way of equating them with witchcraft. And witchcraft now is something that a lot of people are really interested in. They find it really exciting and really something that's quite quirky and quite unusual. You see a lot of, there's and back where I'm from in Lanarkshire, there's a hairdressing salon that is all of their branding based around witchcraft, and you go in and it's all like, stars and galaxy, and it's all, like little kind of witches brew pots everywhere. It's lovely. So it's interesting how things back in, Victorian eras versus now, there is so much difference. And now bitch is a word that people say, oh, hey, bitch, how you doing, bitch? It's very much just part of everyday sort of life. It's not really has the same edge or the same offence to it that it once did. And I think that's easier when it's Victorian era or ancient Rome to now. But I think with the word queer, it's been such a short space of time. Like within a lifetime, the word queer has changed. And I think that is, and from my perspective, where the discomfort lies, because we haven't had centuries or decades even to adjust. It's happened in such a short space of time. So it's unlikely that you'll get someone who had the original meaning of the word slut or the original meaning of the word bitch to now having it this total open sense that the word has. Whereas I think queer is very different in that way. And I think also because words like slut and bitch and all those other ones, they're normally just used colloquially, whereas things like queer would be used, for job advertisements, queers need not apply, no queers here. And I think that's the difference, was that people wouldn't say, no sluts here. that didn't really go out, whereas it did for people of our community. So I think, again, that's where the discomfort lies. But something else that I'd like to bring up is just a thing about context. There was a celebrity big, look at me looking to Celebrity Big Brother for philosophical debate, but it was really interesting. It was the year that Courtney Act was on. And anyone who doesn't know, Courtney Act is a drag queen, but is also a non-binary person, goes by he, she, or they, goes by any pronouns. And they were on Celebrity Big Brother, and they'd kind of taken on this role of education about LGBTQ plus issues in a way that we'd never really seen before in reality TV. But there was another person in the Big Brother house who was a celebrity called Anne Widdecombe. Again, anyone who doesn't know who Anne Widdecombe was, they were a politician. I don't think they are anymore.
That changes on a weekly basis.
Yeah, okay. So
whenever there's some hate to be spouted, ready to go.
She pops up. She also flew about like Peter Pan and Strictly Come Dancing. That's kind of was the highest she's ever been in her career, in my opinion. But yeah, so she has very strong opinions about anyone in the LGBTQ plus community. Has in the past made some homophobic, quite often has made some homophobic and transphobic comments. Now, Courtney Act, real name Shane, was talking about queer issues, queer culture, queer entertainers, queer artists, and she chimed in and interrupted and said, well, that's just the problem though. You say queer and it's fine, but if I say it, I get met with a barrage of I'm this and I'm that, and that's why I don't think that's fair. So I just think there's an issue of context that I would like to pass on to Thomas, because he's sitting giving me this kind of dastardly sort of thing. So I would really like to come to you, Tommy, and hear what you have to say about that.
Well, interesting. Anne Widdecombe. I mean, it's really interesting. So I think in a tolerant community, we should all be allowed to have our own political views, and that that is respected. I personally have issue with the Conservative government, particularly because of what they subjected the LGBTQ plus community to. Back in the 80s, some people would argue that yes, they've made quite a lot of change happen over the years, and yes, that's true. However, I think their record, particularly on human rights, is not great in terms of equality and pushing forward. So coming back to Anne Widdecombe, I think it's really difficult, because I remember watching that Big Brother series, right, and absolutely loving it. I'm a Big Brother fan, but that one particular season was really interesting. When she said that, I remember sitting shouting at the TV and just thinking, but there's a reason why you can't say that word, and that comes from your history of absolutely putting down the LGBTQ plus people for years within your party, always voting against LGBT rights and progression, always voting, always spouting bile constantly about how LGBT people are not right, it's not natural, you know, all of those kind of, you know, tropes that are just actually designed to just bring people down with little flyaway comments. And I think it's really difficult that she was then on Big Brother, because then, sorry, not Big Brother, and the other one, Strictly Come Dancing, because in some ways it makes her feel like, oh, look at Auntie Anne, isn't she fun? Isn't she friendly? You know, our bigoted politician, isn't she a fun, friendly LGBT hater? Actually, she's quite misogynist as well. Actually, she's racist. Actually, you know, all of those kind of things, you know. So it's interesting. Yes, you cannot use that word because actually your personal history, as well as the ideologies of the party that you represent, and particularly one she now represents now, because I believe that, or she wasn't until recently, she was a member of the Brexit Party, and indeed she got elected as an MEP. She came out of retirement and became an MEP solely based on, again, her racist kind of point of view. So I just think it's, yeah, really interesting, all of that. I'm going to come on to one more thing as well, which is about, you know, we're talking about the word queer and about that being a word that people associate with insults and derogatory kind of language. And, you know, in America, I'm not quite sure about now, but I think certainly kind of like in the 90s and early 2000s, the word fag was used as a word that was reclaimed by gay men in particular, as a way of kind of doing that thing that we're talking about now with queer, but a way about being called, you know, someone being called a fag or a faggot. Then actually, you know, again, it's another one of those words that for me is like a hugely, you know, painful word. But again, there was a whole kind of, you know, a whole movement of gay men who used that word as a positive attribute and a way to, again, kind of acknowledge the abuse that is at the heart of that, but actually trying to find some way of positively claiming that word. I was saying to you, Alex, before we came online, that actually that a couple of years ago, I went on a holiday to Ibiza, and on the way there, I accidentally ended up on this boys' stag do. On the plane, there was like 25 men, and then me in the corner, and basically all through the flight, I was basically the target of abuse all the way through. They were constantly, you know, shouting queer, they were shouting faggot, they were shouting all these kind of words over at me. And the airline did nothing, even though I was trying to get the attention of the kind of steward and all of that. I then got to Ibiza and then went on this night out and got in the taxi. And to be fair, we were a little bit tipsy and we were kind of singing, I think it was Celine Dion. So I know a bit of a specific audience wants to listen to that. But we were kind of singing in a taxi, and the taxi driver told us to shut up, you faggots. And so again, I kind of, you know, immediately the kind of, you know, Tommy came out, was like, and yeah, kind of had a go about it. But it's really interesting. We tried to complain about it, and the receptionist, this woman on reception, kind of came out and said, "Why are you causing so much fuss? What are you complaining about?" And I said, "Well, the man called me a faggot. I want to, you know, I want something to be done about that." And she literally went, "Why? Why would you want something done about that?" And I kind of thought, okay. And I thought, you know, we were in Ibiza, so I was thinking, okay, maybe that doesn't have the same connotations in Spain. Maybe there's a different word that's used, and maybe that doesn't mean anything in that context. But I was certainly really shocked by you know, the hurling and abuse. But I think, you know, and then kind of as a result of that, my friends and I have now used that word as a way, just together with each other, as a way of kind of almost acknowledging what happened in that moment. So we would say that word to each other, but in a way that almost kind of suggests that we were part of something together. There was during a moment which was meant to be like really lovely and on a holiday and having a really nice downtime, but actually became a really painful day. And then subsequently, you know, the next few months, you know, I couldn't stop thinking about it and about how, you know, it's always an indicator about kind of where are we at in terms of the world right now, and people thinking that LGBTQ plus rights are, oh, they're fine now. They are absolutely not fine now. And certainly, you know, in this country, I know we've talked about other countries before on the Outcry, but actually even within this country, actually they're not all right. Oh, that was a monologue. I went on there like I was on like Shakespeare or something. I'll shut up now.
No, that was great. And I think it's important, whilst I in the boat with Eleanor. I would probably identify as queer first because it's a catch-all for me, because in terms of not only sexuality but gender as well, I am not in a box. I am somewhere between everything, so fluid. I'm practically a glass of water. So it makes it easier for me to just say, yeah, I'm queer, and something a little bit mysterious that people then don't know what that means. And I quite like to leave them wanting a bit in there. But having said that, I am still of that slightly older, younger generation, and slightly younger, older generation, where I have heard that word being used in the worst possible way. And now at this point, I've heard that word being used in the best possible way. And I think that's where Eleanor's slideshow and presentation, the point of that is so important, to understand the words that you're using and look into your words, as Eleanor said, invite you to dive into the wonderful world of words. It's so important. If we're going to use words, especially if we're going to reclaim words, we have to know where they came from first. Because if we start using them as a reclamation without knowing what we're reclaiming, then it kind of loses all meaning. While we hear differences in the word queer, for some people it is a slur still, and it's something that is used to hurt our community. For others, it's something that is a reclamation and represents our power and our uniqueness and our eccentricity. We are, regardless, really emboldened by people who are able to have the courage to start to reclaim the word, and anyone who now regularly uses it to represent our beauty and our pride and our amazing identities that really can't be put in a box. And hopefully we can end up at a place where the word queer is used to describe our amazing fluidity, our amazing kind of middle finger to anything that's, you know, society says is right, because there's no right answer. It's just whoever you are. And queer is our culture, and it's something that we couldn't be more proud of. And something else that we're super proud of is our youth advisory council called The Body, many of whom have joined us in our studio audience and also on Facebook tonight. Anyone who is watching who doesn't know what The Body is our youth advisory council. So The Body is made up of dancers who have recently graduated. It's also made up of dancers in training. They help us to give feedback in projects like the In Out Crowd. What would you like to see in it? What do you think would be useful? It's also used to help us build projects, help us get projects out there. And in return, we offer things like free workshops. We offer them mentorship opportunities. Folks like the fabulous Eleanor, we offer bursaries when we can to help out on specific projects or do specific roles within the company. But we have two wonderful other body members with us tonight who both use BSL, and they would like to share with all of us some LGBTQ+ specific BSL that hopefully we can start to use in our everyday life to make our Pride a little bit more inclusive. So I'm going to pass over to Claire and Leslie just to talk us through the BSL, and feel free to join along if you're watching as well. It's good fun.
Hi, so basically just for a little thing behind this is we've been doing a lot of work, and we did like unconscious bias training and like different things as part of The Body, and we kept hearing the same words being said and we actually didn't know the signs to them, and we thought we should probably know the signs to the words that we're using, and because the LGBTQ+ community is such a big part of who Shaper Caper are, we thought we would learn some signs to share with everyone in it, and then they've given us the opportunity to share them further, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty much summed that up. So we're going to start off with the word gay, and we're going to have a flat palm, and we're going to give a big thumbs up, join them together and just wiggle it back and forward. And that is gay.
And the next sign is the sign for lesbian. So you take the same flat hand, and this time you make an L shape, and then you wiggle it about again.
So bisexual is you've got your two fingers, you turn it to the side, and then you just join the two fingers up close, and that is bisexual.
So we have the sign for gender, which is just the letter G, and you would say gender in your mouth pattern.
Yeah, So non-binary would have to be gender and then non-binary. So gender, non-binary. Yeah.
And similar to that, we have gender fluid, so it's the same gender, and then fluid.
Or you can sign it with gender and then merge them all in together for fluid. And then gender fluid, yeah. Following on from that is transgender. So if you want to take your 2 fingers and bring it to the middle of your chest and then just flip them round. Transgendered.
We have a list. So the sign for asexual is you take your 2 hands like this and then you just bring them in towards your chest. So asexual.
Next is pansexual with the flat hand again, and then you're just following that round with your hand. Yeah.
And speaking of the words that you were talking about, we have 2 signs for queer. So the first one is make the letter Q with your hand.
Or you can do it where you grab like almost like a cup shape with your hand and bring it up to your hair and then just make big waves with it. It's almost like you have this luscious hair.
And then we have the sign for pride, which is you take your thumbs up, stick your chest up, and pride. So from this, you could say happy pride.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's all. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yes, thank you so much, Claire and Leslie. That is just about us finished. So we hope that you'll all be practicing your signs for gender, for if you're gay, lesbian, bisexual. I'm trying to make sure I can remember them all. And hopefully, yeah, we can just make all of our BSL a little bit more LGBTQ plus inclusive and make our LGBTQ plus language a little bit more inclusive for anyone using BSL. So again, thank you so much, Claire and Leslie, for giving us that presentation there. Thank you so much to our special correspondent, Eleanor, for giving us that presentation on the word queer.
Oh,
And
Alex, we've lost your sound, we think.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Is that better? Are we back? Yes, okay, fabulous. Sorry, I was then just suddenly by myself. I was like out here like a wee lone fish. Yes, that's a good point as well. Apologies, just to circle back. Anyone who would like to go over that BSL for LGBTQ plus folks, again, it is on Shaper Capers Instagram and Facebook, and it's also on our bodies page as well, which is on Instagram, which is Shaper Capers the Body. Again, thank you so much to our special guests, which was Eleanor and Tommy there. Sorry, it cut out just before I says that. And of course, Claire and Leslie as well. Anyone who is watching will be back here again, just in this very spot for the next In Out Crowd session, which will be on the 7th of September. And we'll be discussing lots of other great stuff. Up until then, you can follow our Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. You can keep an eye out on our podcasts and our blogs that have an LGBTQ plus focus, as well as talking about all the other wonderful projects we're doing. Until the 7th of September, we would like to have a happy Pride-ful evening, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.